this dynamic with a person who has ADHD and a person who doesn't, and how the person with ADHD, as they're struggling with with the organizational parts of life, or maybe emotions or impulsivity and things like that, can lead to dynamics in the relationship where they feel very criticized by their neurotypical partner who maybe doesn't have those challenges and finds those parts of life quite easy to manage, and maybe doesn't understand why they're so hard for the ADHD person to manage. But underneath, there's usually more going on there. And so understanding what's underneath and how to actually communicate what's underneath instead.
Hi, everyone. So today we're going to be talking about ADHD in relationships.
Yeah, we are.
We're going to be talking about what it's like for an ADHD person being in a relationship with a neurotypical person, how they may be feeling within that relationship, some of the common presentations that we currently see within the workplace. And we're also going to be talking about what it may be like for the other person in their shoes, and some other challenges that may come into the space as well. Just before we start, we at Safe Place Therapy here like to pay our respects to the traditional custodians of the land, and we like to pay our respects to elders past and present, and acknowledge that land was never ceded, and that this is and always will be Aboriginal land and First Nations land. So to start off, I'm Daniel DiPietro. I'm a sexologist and psychotherapist here at Safe Place Therapy, and this is my colleague. And
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you. My name is Sophie Manente, and I'm a counselor here at Safe Place Therapy. And Daniel and I have worked together for a few years.
Yes, it's been really lovely.
It's been great.
Yeah.
And talking about ADHD and relationships today.
Yes.
Excited.
Yeah, I'm keen for it.
Yeah.
So jumping in then, I'm wondering what perhaps you have seen come through the door when it comes to ADHD folks in relation with a neurotypical person even. That seems to be something that we've been discussing in our current caseload. It's something that we typically see.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's something that I often come across. I think a lot of the challenges that we can see when we're working with people individually on ADHD can kind of come across into the challenges for relationships as well. Like a lot of the challenges with the organizational parts of life, challenges with impulsivity maybe, or managing emotions. All of these things really impact on a relationship and how two people share life together. And so I find that a lot of the challenges can come up in those areas in relationships as well.
And so, I also experience in my current caseload, this sense around task management, and that being a real sticking point in relationships, particularly when one person's living with ADHD and the other person's neurotypical in a way. I call it the criticized partner, because that's typically what I hear them talk about in their experience. And then on the other shoe, it's almost like this caregiver role. Is that something that you experience as well in your current?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I've seen that dynamic many times.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good way of putting it, that there's this kind of this dynamic with a person who has ADHD and a person who doesn't, and how the person with ADHD, as they're struggling with with the organizational parts of life, or maybe emotions or impulsivity and things like that, can lead to dynamics in the relationship where they feel very criticized by their neurotypical partner who maybe doesn't have those challenges and finds those parts of life quite easy to manage, and maybe doesn't understand why they're so hard for the ADHD person to manage.
Yeah.
And so that the non-ADHD person can easily become frustrated or upset, and end up kind of expressing that in ways that maybe are, while the emotions and the experiences all really understandable, that can often be expressed in ways that can kind of get in the way of resolutions happening.
Yeah. And, I really resonate with that. In my work, I talk a lot when it comes to the relational aspect in terms of, what's underneath the criticism. And, sometimes there's this real subjective view around, because I should be able to do this, you should be able to too. And I'm quite curious around, how do you work with that as well? I'm happy to share some of my perspectives as to how I see that happening in the space. But I'm quite curious around how you would work with that if one person has a certain way of being perhaps places this expectation, whether explicitly or otherwise, on the other?
Yeah, good question. I think that a large part of how I work, and you touched on it, I think that such an important part of it is figuring out what's underneath. You know, what are the kind of needs that are being expressed there? They're coming out in ways, you know, like feeling very frustrated and saying, "Why can't you just do this?"
Yes.
But what's really going on there? What? So for both parties, trying to really understand what's happening, because on the surface, and often what people are talking about, what they're bringing to us, I think, at least from what I've seen, is, you know, one person is feeling very criticized and the other person is feeling very, you know, hard done by or resentful, or feeling like they're having to do all this caregiving and taking on all this work. But underneath, there's usually more going on there. And so understanding what's underneath and how to actually communicate what's underneath instead.
Because that's the hard part.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like that's a lot of our work in terms of trying to decipher or distill what's actually trying to be said here. And, you know, I'm quite curious on the criticize partner part. Now, I could talk into a little bit about perhaps what some folks share in my space. I'm wondering, what are some of the things that you perhaps feel get shared in your space first around when you say to criticize partner? What do you feel like is typically being criticized or there's criticism of?
Criticism of.
Yeah.
So the person who's receiving the criticism.
Yeah, so the person living with ADHD, and it's like they have to meet some sort of expectation or be a certain way within the relationship with a neurotypical person. You know, what's some of the criticism that you may hear people express in your space?
In my space, I think often there'll be criticism of their capability and capacity, and can come and even though, you know, there are challenges there with capability and capacity, so it's not like it's coming from somewhere, you know, there is a challenge there. But because it is coming across as a criticism, then that can feel very, for the criticized partner, or, you know, the ADHD partner in this case, that can feel very demoralizing for them.
Yeah.
And so they're often talking to me about feeling demoralized, feeling very hurt, feeling misunderstood, feeling not good enough. It can be a lot of really difficult emotions coming up there.
I resonate with that deeply when I'm across from a couple or a relationship where that, you know, the term of the criticized partners of the person living with ADHD, what we typically see in space here is that it's a sense around, you know, I can't do, it's like I keep getting told I can't do the task efficiently, or perhaps I don't have enough resources to go out and do certain things. And it's like I'm being seen as this killjoy. Or on the other end, the polar opposite is that I have too much energy and I'm seen as someone who's quite impulsive and, you know, can't be grounded.
Yep. Yeah, a lot of like looking at things from a deficiency standpoint,
Yes.
isn't it? Yeah.
And I'm glad you were talking about this, because I always talk about the strengths as well. And we're having a bit of a chat before we jump to your space around the strengths. You know, I'm wondering what perhaps strengths you see within ADHD folk. And Soph and I really talk about a strengths approach as well when it comes to people living in neurodiversity, that it's there's a lot of the negative aspect that gets kind of put forward, or the deficit gets put forward, but there are a lot of strengths, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was a fun part of our conversation, I think, because I think you know, I think a big one that stands out for me is the tendency towards novelty.
Yes.
And the kind of moving towards novelty that people with ADHD have, where they seek out a lot of novelty, which means they're good at making it happen in their lives, which is actually really good for relationships, especially for long-term relationships. Bringing novelty into a relationship brings the spark back. Exactly. Which I'm sure a lot of people can relate to, you know, in terms of having been in long-term relationships and maybe losing that spark. Someone with ADHD is going to be really good at creating that spark just in how they move through the world. And that's really cool.
Yeah, it's awesome. And, you know, as well as perhaps feeling, you know, we talked about feelings as well. So, you know, some ADHD folk or neurodiverse folk may feel a lot deeper than someone who's neurotypical. And so that could open up vulnerability as well, and not just for themselves, but for their partner. It's kind of modeling that sense of vulnerability that I could show these emotions that perhaps aren't typically seen by a neurotypical person. I'm not sure if
Mm.
that resonates.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think I feel that. I feel that. I see that a lot as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that ability, a capability to feel emotions quite deeply.
Yeah.
Sometimes, yeah, it can be challenging when there are some difficult emotions that come up in a really big way, and sometimes, that there needs to be some extra space there to. I sometimes talk to my clients who experience these sort of bigger emotions because of neurodiversity to make some space for that, and
Yeah.
that there can be room to process that. But on the flip side, well, it means that the good emotions are also experienced in a bigger way. So
That's right.
joy can be expressed in this really effusive and vibrant
Yeah.
way, and excitement and
Yeah, it brings a lot of energy, a lot of
yeah,
amazing energy into a relationship.
yeah,
And, sometimes when there is a sort of a conflict within a relationship, that gets kind of lost.
mhm,
And, coming back to the relational aspect between someone who's neurodiverse and someone who's neurotypical, we use that term, the caregiver. That's what I currently hear in my space. When someone comes in who's neurotypical in a relationship, someone living with ADHD, can you talk a little bit into about perhaps what you hear from them in terms of what they feel like they're caregiving for?
So the non-ADHD partner,
Yeah,
what do they feel like they're
yeah,
caregiving for?
yeah,
Yeah, so I think from their experience, and it's thank you for asking because it's so important to focus on both
yeah,
experiences in this relationship
yeah.
and this dynamic, right?
It's a relationship.
It's a relationship. There's two people
That's right.
bringing everything equally.
That's right.
Um, but yeah, from the person who ends up, we're calling it caregiving in this video because that's what we often hear, that
Yeah.
partner expressing something along those lines, even if the word caregiver doesn't resonate for everyone. Something along those lines often
Yeah.
comes across. It's of something around, I have to do so much,
Yeah.
I have to do so much.
Overextending,
Yeah.
overcompensating.
Yeah, overextending, overcompromising, and having to, yeah, do so much because of, what it
X
feels
challenge that.
because of X challenge that's happening in the relationship or in the home.
Yeah.
And I often expressing this feeling of having to sacrifice,
Yeah.
because of that overextending, this kind of feeling of sacrifice enough, and alongside that, a feeling of maybe resentment or anger
Yeah.
or even feeling used sometimes, things
Mm.
like that.
Particularly when they're longer term relationships.
Yeah.
That someone may feel that way if this has been the dynamic for so long. That
Yep.
it feels like, I've kind of compromised my needs for so long here. And it's like I'm wanting something to change. But, going back, it's like when those needs are named, they come from a place of criticism.
Mm-hmm.
Because the hurt's been there, just kind of festering, so to speak, for so long.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. It just sits there
Yeah.
and isn't what because it can be so hard to communicate what the deeper needs are. But because those needs aren't being communicated, they don't get a chance to be seen and met.
Yeah.
And so they're just sitting there and festering. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
it. And so yeah, whenever, I mean, it's a very human thing when you're holding on to something for so long, it starts to fester.
Yeah.
It really does. It's a very human and understandable
Yeah.
process. And that's
Yeah.
why learning to actually understand what those needs are and how to communicate them in a way that is just going to make it easier for your partner to understand,
Yeah.
because if you're coming at it in this really kind of from that place of hurt,
Yeah.
but it's coming across as criticism, it is going to make it harder for your partner to hear you and understand you,
Well, who
because
could hear that?
who can hear that?
Yeah.
Yeah, who can hear, some version of what's wrong with you
Yeah.
without
Why can't you just do this?
why can't you just?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Why can't you just?
Yeah.
Who can hear that
Yeah.
without feeling defensive or without really being able to take much in other than the criticism?
Yeah. And that's so important to name the language. I'm wondering how you feel like you work with that language. I like to hear perhaps how that you navigate that space. And I'm happy to share as well. I feel like that's such a key component in that relational work. How do we I guess assist our clients to speak their needs more authentically and from a place of emotion rather than it coming from this place of criticism?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. I think, yeah, in terms of it's, my goal is always to support the clients to articulate what those needs
Yeah.
are. And that will just be through asking a lot of questions to kind of get underneath what's really happening, kind of acknowledging, yes, you've expressed this, but what does it mean for you? What if this is true?
Yeah.
What does this actually mean?
Yeah. And so again, what we're doing here, what we do in our work is there are both sides to the story.
Yep.
Right. But yeah, so yeah, what does this mean for you?
Yeah, that's it. Would it be a similar approach for you?
Yeah, it would be more so, yeah, quite similar approach and understanding, I guess, where can we find some middle ground? Because currently what's happening isn't working. Trying to speak from a place where, again, the partner or the criticized partner could actually hear and then have the resources then to lean in. Because if someone's being criticized, who's going to want to lean into that?
Yeah.
No, that's so difficult.
Yeah.
So it's really navigating how do we get our clients to express their needs so that they could get met and in a way that sits better within a relationship. And I talk also about task, as you mentioned at the very beginning of our talk here, navigating. So if we are doing X task at home, is that realistic in terms of what we have for our organizational capacity or task capacity? Do we need to change what we use our spoons for?
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't know how you sit with the whole spoons aspect of it, but is that something you use in your work when it comes to relationships? And I guess navigating where that sits for certain people?
I think so. Yeah, yeah. I think that's so useful as well. That kind of framework of spoon theory, thinking
Yeah.
about how we need a certain amount of spoons to do a certain amount of tasks, but we don't all have the same amount of spoons
No.
to start off
So
with.
subjective.
They're so subjective. There's no rules to spoons.
No.
And so, yeah, I think that's so helpful as well.
Yeah.
Kind of helping clients understand how their spoons, how their energy actually works. And what is a realistic expectation and how to manage that and what needs to be done. And I think it is a lot easier for the partner who does perhaps have some reduced capacity. Like people with ADHD can struggle with these things. That is real, but that needs to be kind of understood and supported
Yes.
rather than
Yes. Yeah.
criticized.
Yes.
But if I've seen anyway, in the people I've worked with, that if the person with ADHD is met with that kind of curiosity and understanding,
Love that word.
yeah, curiosity. Yeah, the curiosity of like, so what is it actually like for you then? What is actually realistic for you?
Yeah.
How are you actually feeling
Yes.
in this space between us while we talk about this? If they're met with that, I've sometimes even seen their capacity increase because they
Feel
suddenly
understood.
feeling understood is really good for us.
Yes. It does wonders.
It does wonders.
It does
It's
wonders.
great for your mental health. Like it really is.
We may not be sitting here.
Exactly. It does wonders. And so, yeah, I find that it can just open up so much room for a new kind of dynamic to happen.
Definitely.
If that person is met with curiosity and warmth and
Yeah.
at least a desire to understand, even if the other partner doesn't fully understand yet, at least a desire to understand.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And this has been really awesome. Talking about that sense of curiosity, opening up, it allowing to increase capacity. We also touched on, just before coming into this chat, the acknowledgement of each other's roles within a relationship and what we're contributing to the conflict here. I hear sometimes in my space that the person who's living with ADHD may say, well, I can't help it. I've got ADHD. And I'm wondering how you perhaps see that play out, if you see that play out in your space, and how do you navigate that? Because I have some ways of working with that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Yeah. This is, so important as well because it is, everyone's roles in a dynamic has to be fully acknowledged. And it can be very easy, especially as we talk about how we need to really understand and support people with ADHD and what they're dealing with. It can be very easy then to kind of, for that to feel like, well, for the person with ADHD, this is just me,
Yeah.
and there's nothing I can do about it.
Which there's some acknowledgement and acceptance on that, right? That this is what someone is living with, and this is their lived experience.
Yep.
But there's also, so that's fine if I'm by myself, but if I'm in relation with another person, what I do influences that other person also. So then what do we need to do to take accountability there?
Yeah, that's it. And I think I like to talk about how anyone, like we all have things that make us difficult to be with
Yeah.
and difficult to live with.
Yes.
And we all have to be responsible for those things.
Yes.
The impacts that might have in a
And that
relationship.
doesn't matter if you're neurodiverse, neurotypical, it's any relationship.
Any relationship, any person.
Yeah.
Exactly. And for some people, the things that make them sometimes a difficult partner can be related to a health condition. Sometimes it's not. But either way, we even if something is not our fault, it's still something that we have to have some responsibility for because it is having an impact on the people around us. And like you said, if I'm by myself, that's okay. I can lean into it. That's the way you are, and that's perfectly fine. It's not affecting anyone. But if it is affecting someone, then you'll probably find that your relationships will maybe work a bit better and feel a bit happier if you can kind of meet the other person halfway and go, I acknowledge and accept that this is who I am, but I also acknowledge and accept that it's having this impact on you, and I care about the impact it's having on you.
Yeah, and beautifully said that I this is what's happening for me, this is who I am, but I could also see this is having a big impact on you. And so where do we meet that kind of midway mark?
Yeah.
And having open discussions and curiosity around that. So do we need, I think what we've covered here so far is, do we need to reorganize how we do our housework together? Or do we need to reorganize if there's any sensory challenges there when we go out, where we go out?
Yeah, that's it. Is there something about how the person with ADHD is managing their day-to-day life? Maybe there's a lot of energy being drained elsewhere, so there's not much energy left for doing things around the home or for organizing things for the family or whatever it is. So yeah, kind of thinking about all of that. Again, curiosity, that's where it comes in. If we can really try to understand the whole picture and try to come up with a way of organizing things that actually is realistic and works better, is so much easier when we kind of come at it from this curious, open perspective of what's happening for both.
Definitely. And also, it's quite important for anyone in any relationship to be aware of what they're needing to recharge. And, particularly for some neurodiverse folk that I see, they talk about this burnout experience. And it's so what do we need to do to put things in place so that you could fully show up in your relationship when you're at home? So do you need some space for you for X amount of periods so that we could refill your spoon drawer?
Yeah, that's it. I love that. Exactly. That's such a big part of just learning how to live with ADHD or kind of neurodiverse condition. Is learning how your energy is actually impacted by your day-to-day life, and if there are things that can be tweaked so that you can have more energy for the things that where you feel like maybe you're not having enough energy for, or the things that are important to you, like hopefully your relationship.
Yes.
Yeah.
And one of the other aspects that we discussed was more so how we enter relationships. Yes.
Yes.
And do you also feel like it's important for us to do a bit of a disclosure, or are you wanting to leave a disclosure around? Because I'm living with neurodiversity.
Yep.
Do you feel like that would be important for the video if we do it, or just leave?
We don't have to. I think if you'd like to, I think I'd rather not. For me personally, but if you want to, absolutely.
No, I can leave that out.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. Cool.
So we're back.
So,
we also had a bit of a chat before coming in here around when people start dating who are living with ADHD, and sometimes, I hear some folk who get swept away in all the energy of it all. And sometimes what can happen is that the person can see that they perhaps set up some unrealistic expectations as to what they could actually deliver per se. within a relationship. I'm wondering if you've seen that happen in your space, or clients have reported that in terms of whether it be a neurotypical partner saying, well, they weren't like this when I first saw them, or, when I first saw them, they were busy as a bee, and now it's just so hard to, whatever it may be.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true. That's so interesting that, yeah, I remember when we talked about this, that it can be such an interesting part of dating for people with ADHD, because again, about the tendency towards novelty and the being really energized by novelty, and new relationships are full of novelty. And
NRE.
yeah, NRE, new relationship energy. Exactly. It's a universal experience. But for people with ADHD, there's just this added layer to it. There can be, anyway, this added layer to it, where it can just give them so much energy because because of that novelty and how they're, so kind of responsive to novelty.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, they can maybe have a lot more energy in general than is their typical kind of baseline.
Yeah.
And so
More spoons in the drawer.
more spoons in the drawer. Yes, thank you. Exactly. More spoons in the drawer. So they maybe can do things and show up in ways that are maybe not typical for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And might be able to do a lot more, plan a lot more dates, or, show up with surprises, or, those kind of really fun, exciting things in a new relationship, but that do take some energy to put together.
They do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And perhaps doesn't set a realistic expectation that if I was to enter a relationship with this person, is that sustainable? And I talk when I have clients or individuals who come in who have started dating, who are living with ADHD. We talk around sense about how am I showing up authentically? How am I painting the picture that is authentically me? Because it's important that we're authentic in our relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if that's something you resonate with as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That it can be so tempting, I think, in it for anyone really to try and really put their best foot forward when they're newly dating someone. But we do have to be authentic. And we do have to try and set some realistic expectations for who we are, and for what dating me would look like.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think important for anyone going into dating, but for the purposes of this video and how people with ADHD experience relationships, good to just keep that in mind. If you're experiencing this huge upswing of energy when you're newly dating someone, it can be maybe easy to think like, God, it's the new me.
I'm revitalized.
Well, it could just be new relationship energy.
Yeah, that's right. And I invite the sense of slowing things down. Let's just slow down and really sit with and be really firm and secure with our boundaries. Doesn't mean we need to close someone off completely, but let's be kind of secure with our boundaries here, and perhaps not be porous, because sometimes new relationship energy can make us a bit porous with our boundaries. We just want to be with that person, and we want to experience new things with them, and that novelty, as you named.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, we can be too porous, like kind of give too much and put too much. We might, be more willing to show up to work tired the next day because we were up late with, with this new person we're seeing, and things like that. Again, like, can set up these unrealistic expectations for how much time and energy you might have for this person. Once reality kicks in, as you realize maybe this
isn't what I do.
Yeah, maybe this isn't sustainable, not something I can maintain over time. So just being aware of whether boundaries are becoming a bit too porous, a bit too wavy.
Yeah, exactly. And another aspect that I feel like is quite important for us to name here is, sometimes there is pressures for neurodiverse folk to fit into a neurotypical mold. And I want to talk about that as well, because yes, there's NRE, new relationship energy, but there's also a sense about, isn't this what I'm supposed to be doing? Can you talk a little bit into, I guess, if you experience that also in your space?
Yeah. Totally. I get what you mean. Yeah. Like there can be this, the kind of neurotypical expectations.
Yeah.
Also, I think that's something that's spoken about a lot in the neurodiversity space, but I think it affects things in early stages of dating as well. There can be this kind of neurotypical script for how the early stages of dating are meant to go.
Yes.
And so maybe a person who's neurodiverse might feel a pressure to meet those expectations, like be really good at planning the dates and always bring flowers and, all these kinds of things. Which again might be unrealistic to maintain
Yes.
over time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how do you navigate that space when it does emerge, or if it emerges?
I think, I'm just thinking back now. I think it's definitely something I've had chats with clients about on a one-on-one basis when I'm been working with a client for a while and they enter into a new relationship and we start to notice together this new relationship energy thing happening, or this pressure they might be putting on themselves to be a certain way and act a certain way, show up a certain way, and how much does that actually fit
Yeah. And
with who they are?
And I'm glad you kind of touched on that aspect. We call this the felt sense in the therapeutic work. It's this bodily sensation of emotion that emerges. And, that's how I kind of work with it when it comes up in the space. I'm quite curious, the curiosity as to, so what is underneath that in that expectation, and what is that feeling behind that? Because, sometimes a lot of neurodiverse folk could talk about shame. Right. And again, why can't I just?
Yeah.
Rather than it coming from perhaps someone else, it happens internally.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of understanding where understanding what is driving certain things and tapping into that felt sense. I think you're right, is so helpful for that.
Yeah.
Like what is driving this need to really prove yourself in this new relationship?
Yeah.
Is it maybe shame, or is it maybe a lot of fear or anxiety or things like that? Of course, an element of anxiety is normal in a new relationship, but if we dig a little deeper, have that curiosity, again, what's really going on underneath, really understanding what's happening there. That's the theme. Yeah.
What's happening?
Get in there, get underneath.
Get underneath.
What's going on? Yeah, I think that I found that to be really helpful for people navigating that situation as well.
Yeah, and gives them a bit of a compass.
Yeah, an internal compass, which I think is so useful for so many situations in life.
Of course.
But especially with dating, where
It's a minefield.
dating's a minefield, whether we're talking about new relationships or even long-term relationships, where it,
That be a minefield.
that's a minefield as well,
How do we keep it alive?
Yeah.
Spark.
Yeah.
How do we have different experience, and how we transition to different stages of our lives?
Yeah, exactly. That's it. How do we work through all the, once a relationship has gone on for a long time and you've had so many experiences together and your relationship kind of has built its own issues, and how do you kind of see through all of that and try to understand what's really going on?
Yeah.
That can be a minefield. But if you do just, with whatever in life, kind of practice tapping into that felt sense of how are you actually feeling in different situations? What does that tell you about the situations you're in?
Yes.
If you practice making decisions based on that felt sense and you kind of see where it leads you, hopefully a good place, if you kind of harness that more and more over time, it can really help when you get into these murky waters of, relationships, for example. One of the most important but complicated areas of our lives.
If not
absolutely the most important.
Because it's, how do I fit in with this person's way of being, and how do our jigsaw pieces connect?
Yeah, how do our jigsaw pieces connect? We're all kind of got our own edges, little gaps and things, How do we make those?
And we just try and make it work.
Yeah, that's it. Try our best to make it work. But I think these things help a lot.
Yeah, to understand as well, are we the right jigsaw piece?
Yeah, that's it.
And that's a little bit of a compass. Are we the right jigsaw piece for this other?
Yeah, exactly. That's it. Again, and that can be such a hard conversation to have, but such an important conversation. And again, why being authentic is so important, because if you're not quite the right jigsaw pieces for each other, then maybe that can be worked out a bit easier if you are showing up authentically.
Yeah.
If you're curious as well,
Yes.
It can be easier to have those difficult conversations.
Those deep conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, which, these are just such good relationship skills to have, I think. And I don't know if you've experienced this. I'd be curious if you have.
Please.
But sometimes when talking about these sorts of issues, like navigating ADHD in relationships and things like that, when clients learn some of these sorts of skills, it seems to be able to help them in lots of other areas of life
Oh,
as well.
definitely. It's
Yeah.
so interpersonal, and that's
Yeah.
with just many different relationships in someone's lives.
Yeah.
Some clients come back and they say, "Well, I actually had an okay time at my family's place."
Yeah.
Right. Or, I had this one friend who, I've been having a bit of a gripe with, but we've come to some understanding, and I've been able to name when something hasn't made me feel where I felt uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's just made them feel bit more authentic to themselves and their own needs.
Mm. That's so true. Yeah, great. That's great to hear that it's like these skills are so transferable.
Yeah.
You know, these
It's not just romantic relationships. It's any relationship.
Yeah, that's so true. I think we probably in our rooms we probably hear people talk about their romantic relationships and how ADHD can impact romantic relationships more often than maybe other relationships. I think another common one I hear though is housemates.
Yeah. Those one
Maybe.
that comes in my space as well.
Yeah, I think I hear that quite a lot. Probably with families as well, like parents talking about their children and those relationships as well. But romantic relationships, it seems to be the most common one because there is the most there's just so much closeness and intimacy in those relationships, especially if you're living together. So there's so much more overlapping of worlds. So these challenges can just be a lot
Yeah.
more prominent there.
Yeah. And, there's typically there'd be a lot more workability because I don't know about yourself, but, I've rarely seen the housemate come to therapy in an interpersonal setting or a relational setting. So, it's much easier to work with. But if you are having those challenges with a housemate or with family, again, it's just sticking with that compass
Mm.
that we've just been talking into here and really being noticing what's emerging for you. And I think the famous quote there is, the body knows.
Mm. The body knows.
Yeah.
The body knows. Yeah, I think we've all well, I think anyway, I know I've experienced it a lot and I've spoken to so many clients, friends, coworkers, everyone in life of like we know that feeling of when you just have a gut feeling. Your body is just telling you something.
It knows.
It knows. Even if you don't want to hear it. Even if you don't know what to do with that feeling or even if you don't even really understand why you're having that feeling, it's just giving you a feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that would be important to bring into if you needed support around if it's hard to sit with that feeling or you have a bit of a vague understanding. Coming into individual or partnership therapy can be a benefit for us to help you explore that a little bit deeper, build some language around that, and for you to live your authentic life or be in your authentic relationship as you're wanting to be.
Yeah, that's it. Well put. Well put. I think that's it. I think coming into that space, it gives you a space where it is easier to be curious.
Yes.
I think it can be hard when you're at home with your partner and the dishes haven't been done again and so have to come at it with curiosity. You can get there. It's totally possible to get there.
Yes.
But I think coming to therapy can be such a great kind of scaffolding to do that when it's to get you going in that direction when it's really hard.
Yeah.
Because I think it's just easier when there's a third person in the room.
That's right.
For example, it's not just the two of you at
Who's
home.
unbiased.
The third person in the room who is unbiased, who's trained in holding these sorts of issues and is really comfortable holding the issue. So it's not just up to the two of you to manage this. And I think for all these reasons, it can be so much easier to navigate these issues. But, I guess because curiosity has come up as such an important theme for us today, I think I often do see feeling a bit easier for people to have that curiosity in a therapy space than it is in some situations in outside in day-to-day lives. And I think I've experienced that when I go to therapy too. I find it more easier to approach things with curiosity for myself.
Yes.
Rather than in my day-to-day life, sometimes when I'm just so wrapped up in everything going on. Everything going on. Yeah, everything going on in life. Yeah. Exactly.
And I'm really glad you touched on that, sometimes I also hear come through the space of, well, this is just the way someone is. And what I'm hearing from you as you kind of describe that is that change is possible in spaces like ours.
Yeah.
And I've seen that change firsthand myself, and it's a beautiful thing to see. So again, if you are needing support around any challenges, whether that be individually, relationally, you are someone living with ADHD or you're the neurotypical partner, not sure how to navigate things, come to Safe Place Therapy and would be able to help support you in that endeavor.
Yeah, absolutely. We'd love to. We love doing it.
Yeah.
We love doing it. And we actually, I am with you 100%. I've totally seen that change happen for people.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful thing it's a beautiful thing to witness, a beautiful thing to experience as well. Yeah.
Well, we're at time.
We're at time.
We're at time.
We are.
But this has been such a lovely just powwow of this. And this is a field I'm so passionate about. I love working with neurodiverse folks. I work a lot with relationships, and it's just been so great hearing your insights, how you work, and I just resonated a lot with what you've said. So
Yeah,
for sure.
great. Of course. Yeah, no, this was great. Thanks so much for kind of leading us through the space. I really enjoyed it. And we sort of have these chats every now and then, but it's great to do it
off screen.
off screen. We do. But it's great to do it in a kind of really intentional
Yeah.
way. And yeah, hear a bit more about your experience too, because I do more individual work. I used to do some relationship work as well, but I don't anymore. Now I'm just doing individual work. But yeah, so great to hear more about the relationship space from you as well.
Yeah. So thank you all for listening, and we hope that you enjoyed the video. Safe Place Therapy is your safe place to talk. Deuce.
Big one.